Welcome to part 2 of Story Expo's Masters of Story Roundtable discussion with world-renowned story experts John Truby, Chris Vogler, David Freeman, Dara Marks, and Corey Mandell, and your host, Derek Christopher.
But you will be rewarded if something is presented to you in a creative way, and you follow that creation. I mean, we don't know where anything is taking us in life. And so there is something there for any writer if they choose to open it up and look at it.
Just picking up on what you said, and you said a lot because you covered a number of topics, but I'm just going to focus in on one, and I'll be a little bit contrary. There's a saying I always tell my students, and the saying is tools, not rules. You tell me the screenwriting rule, I will show you the TV series or the film that completely violates it. And I'm going to do that right now. So the general principle or guideline that's governed film and TV from the beginning of time is find a character or characters with whom we identify. That character or characters are going to have some kind of fear limitation or emotional issue or block. They will be forced to overcome it. Because the audience identifies with them, the audience will be taken along on an emotional ride. When that character feels pain, the audience will feel pain. When that character feels triumph, the audience will feel triumph. That's a nice guideline, and it probably governs 95 or 98% of all stories. Except in modern times, to a very mature audience, which the American audience is, suddenly you have The Sopranos. I think that's where it began. No Sopranos, no Breaking Bad. You have Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Fleabag. These TV series are full of disgusting people. And I don't identify with them, and yet people watch them. Why? I'll let the scholars figure that out. I'm just saying that for every rule, there's going to be exceptions. And this is why I just have given up on teaching rules. And I say, here's some guidelines. I'll also say, break the guidelines, shrink the budget. You want to break every guideline? You don't want to have an Act 1 break and an Act 2 break? Fine, shrink the budget. You want to have characters that we can't stand? Great, go for it. You want to write Fleabag? Great, shrink the budget so that you don't have to make as much money to, break even. So that's the one thing that the main point.
So I understand, meaning that if you break these rules, you are automatically reducing the size of the potential.
You're more likely.
Right.
You might get a home run with The Sopranos. Brilliant writing, surprising writing. Oh, the other guideline is that don't bore people. I had a teacher once, she said, I'll go to see a dance performance. I'll go to see Cirque du Soleil. I'll go see Chinese acrobats. I'll go to see a magic show. I'll go to see a play. But please don't bore me. Please, every 20 seconds, give me something new, a surprise of one form or another. In TV, it might be an unexpected reaction by a character. It might be a revelation of a new character facet. It might be something that's going on beneath the surface of a character. It might be a plot twist. It might be Tom Cruise coming drunk over to Dorothy's house, to Renee Zellweger's house, and bumping his head on a lamp 3 times, or going to a big ear that she has for some reason on her on a shelf, going, hello. I just was watching Jeremy Maguire. It's like, okay, I didn't see that coming. The more you can make the audience go, I didn't see that coming. If the audience is emotionally involved, yeah, you're coming up. You're winning.
Okay, I would say that you greatly misunderstood what I said.
Well, I'm very good at that.
Yes, that's okay.
I'm very, very good at misunderstanding. And I look forward to misunderstanding all of you. If I was going to give a great example of a powerful character arc
in a dramatic series, I would use The Sopranos.
Yeah, but none of the characters have character arcs. They all end up in jail where they belong.
Well, then you don't understand a character arc. A character arc is not a guarantee that a character is going to ascend. A character arc can very easily fail. And then we see that all through our lives. All of us know people who never grew past the age of 35. I mean, a character arc merely presents the challenge in front of the character, whether the character accepts it or not. I mean, if you look at one of the great American tragedies is the trilogy of The Godfather. And at every opportunity, Michael Corleone is offered the opportunity to grow past his limitations. And he succeeds at the end of the plot. He becomes the most powerful, and it is a completely hollow victory. That is a human story. That is a very powerful human story. So a character arc is not a guarantee that a character is going to do anything.
It's also not a guarantee that you're going to like them. You don't have to like them.
Yeah.
It's not important that we sympathize with the character. It's important that we empathize with the character.
But, you know, it also does make the character more relatable. In other words, if I knew a Tony Soprano in real life, I'd probably be terrified of him and, you know, wouldn't want to have anything to do around him. Yet I can watch him because he is playing out an aspect of the human drama. Okay, his operating system is that might makes right, and that he is above the law, and to some degree, he achieves that. But to a greater degree, he is an example of a living hell.
But why do people love him so much then?
Because, you know, I think that, and maybe Chris can help me out here too, I think because all of these characters they're archetypes that live within all of us. So when you have the archetype of a
Walter White.
But let's say, you know, just dealing with Tony Soprano, he's an outlaw.
Yeah.
Okay, and so there is a part of each one of us that wants the outlaw. We want to that when we are mistreated or mischallenged, that someone can go in and right that wrong above the law. So outlaws and all kinds of these are all archetypal aspects of the human of our human drama, and within the realm of Tony Soprano, he is humanized. Okay, there's a lot about Tony Soprano that is absolutely despicable as a human being, and yet we also identify with elements of Tony Soprano that keeps trying, mostly failing, at reaching out, caring about his family, caring about his wife. That's complex.
It's
That's
true.
Really
every time I
interesting.
whack somebody, I think, man, this is just like,
you know,
this is what Tony would have done.
But wait a minute. Are you saying that all drama should be literalized?
No,
it's symbolic. It's metaphorical.
I'm not saying anything. I'm
Could
just saying.
Could I just give a different different interpretation of this?
Yeah.
Are you going to be my simultaneous translator?
It's once again, this is where genre is very helpful.
Yes.
This is a gangster story. The gangster is the most negative main character in all of story, right? They're supposed to be unlikable. It's not that he is going against this identification. You raise a good question. Why do we identify with him anyway? Why do we identify with Michael Corleone? There's a very simple structural reason. They're driving the action. And one of the problems that Coppola and Mario Puzo had when they were at the end of one, and they were thinking about writing two, is they didn't get the response from the audience that they wanted, because you put your finger on it, which is this is a character who succeeds on the plot plane, but falls on the character arc plane. He's become a king. He's also lost his soul and become the devil. This is very rare in storytelling. It's one of the reasons it's one of the great movies. But the audience leaves the theater and they're thinking, fantastic, he nailed all those sons of bitches in the other 5 families.
Right.
And so when they wrote 2, they purposely got away from this classic identification model of structure, where because we want Michael to succeed on the plot level, we go along with the fact that he is a real asshole.
I want to add something just quickly, what Chris has continued to say about how we making a connection with the audience. Something also really powerful happens in what you were just describing. Once we make that identification with the protagonist, they're our protagonist, okay? And notice what happens to us when he's about to kill his brother Fredo. We're not passive in that. We're sitting here saying, don't kill your brother, right? So we are participating in that. And this is why I feel story is is really, I refer to story as the human instruction manual. It's telling us don't go there, okay? That's the value of characters who are
You're absolutely
so
right,
tragic.
but my point is, it's important to distinguish for the writers who might be in this weekend. It's important to distinguish the techniques that Coppola and Puzo used the first time, and then they realized we've got to find ways to distance the viewer, the audience, from this main character so they're not cheering for him to kill his brother.
Right.
Right? And that's brilliant. That's one of the things brilliant.
But how do you still support him after he kills his brother?
Well, you may not support him.
Morally, we don't.
Yeah.
This is very unique.
But we excuse it.
It's very unique. It's very Shakespearean in that way, and it's very advanced technique. Now, one thing I want to pick up on what you're talking about this character. One of the things I'm going to be talking about in this weekend is what I think is the single most important technique in all of story, and it's a very broad one, but it's that plot should come from character. You know, when I was talking before about, what distinguishes the ability to create complex plot is not to say, we don't care about character. Quite the opposite. It's that plot, whatever those beats are, has to come from the character arc that you set up front. If you don't have that connection, whether the person succeeds or not in the plot, the audience doesn't care.
You know, I disagree. I agree that for many films, I really find exceptions to every rule, and now I'll give you an exception to that one. The rule might govern 80% of all films, but the whole idea in Hollywood of high concept means I can pitch you a story and I don't touch upon character, and you can decide if you want to hear it. I'll give you a pitch. A teenage boy goes into the past, stops his parents from falling in love. If they don't fall in love, he won't be born. Now, that's Back to the Future, of course. And for those of you who have never seen it, it's definitely worth seeing. Now, I didn't say he was a shy boy. I didn't say he was an outgoing boy. I know in integration, you would try as much as possible to get the authentic voice, and you might say that's a dated film because there's nothing there that's really expressive of the human condition on a very deep level.
Not at all.
Thank you. There, he doesn't even have a character arc. He's what I call a traveling angel. I don't think I invented that. He comes in, he causes his father to have a character arc. The angel comes in, changes, someone else goes out, goes back to, I think, It's a Wonderful Life. In any case, so there, you sell the pitch just based on that. We don't go into character. You're going to talk about Harry Met Sally, which someone brought up. You're going to talk about Fleabag. It's all about the character. And you could put that character in almost any story. Now, you do have places where they come together. Breaking Bad would be an example where you might say they're equally balanced. I'd say Inside Out is equally balanced between the internal and the integrated of the internal and the plot. But it's a broad spectrum out there of the kinds of stories that people watch. And some are high concept where the characters in their internal life are not as important as just the kick-ass concept. So it's a big, broad world of entertainment.
One of the biggest problems with high concept, and this is where, don't get me into the bugaboo of Pitch Fest, which I despise, but this idea that people think, this meets that, this story meets that story, drives me nuts. Because the problem with a high concept pitch, even though you have to have it, quote, have to have it, is that if it's really high concept, it gives you one scene. One scene. And what most writers don't have the technique for is how do you go from one scene that high concept is based on and extend it out in a movie over 2 hours.
That's just a paucity of imagination.
No, it's not. It is not a paucity of imagination. That is a paucity of technique. They have no clue, especially at the premise level, which is the single most difficult step of, in my opinion, in the writing process, because you have the least to go on. And yet it's the single most important decision that you make, because if you screw that up, you're dead for the next 6 months to a year.
Just to put a bookend on the point, Back to the Future is as high concept as it gets. And we really don't know that much about Marty, the lead character, by the end, except that he's pretty clever in handling situations. It's not like we've done a deep dive into a complex character. And the movie is considered perfect by a lot of people, including me. I wouldn't change anything in it. You know, I learned that if you go 88 miles an hour and you have a flux capacitor, then you exit the time-space continuum and you can do a lot of cool things. And that was enough of a takeaway for me. I smiled a lot, I laughed a lot. And then there are going to be other films that I mentioned, Poor Things, which kind of touches something in me, I don't know why. But it's all character-driven. So it's just a big, entertainment's a big, broad thing. I understand what you're doing is critically important, and I have found the same thing. There were two types of writers. And when I had to hire writers, I had two writing tests. One was the character dialogue test, and one was the imagination brainstorming test, because I so rarely found the two of them in the same character, in the same writer, excuse me. And so I observed, I came to the same conclusion you did on my own. It seems to be there are those two types of people.
Could I bring up a subject that I think is very relevant to everybody, and I think is going to be incredibly relevant this weekend? We are fortunate to have been living through two story revolutions. And this is in all of human history. One is the move of television to become an art form. Because in the last 20 years, as I'm sure everybody here knows, television has taken over as, especially American television, but we're seeing this all over the world, as the #1 medium for quality storytelling in the world. Television far surpasses film, and that's one reason why we're getting so few films, because it cannot compete with television on that level. The other revolution, which may be even bigger, is the reemergence of the female myth. Now, the female myth, and I know this is something Dara's interested in, I know that Chris is interested in. Female myth has been gone from Western culture for 3,000 years, when it was wiped out by male warrior myth.
You want to just briefly explain what the female myth is?
Well, it's a big subject, and one of the things I'm going to be talking about in this weekend is this reemergence of the female myth, how it is distinguished from the male myth, but it is only, things like Inside Out is a perfect example of female myth and how it handles the myth story form, which is essentially a journey story form, how it handles the journey very different than a male myth does. And by the way, one of the interesting things about it is that just because you have a female lead character doesn't mean it's a female myth. Wonder Woman is a male myth story. It's a male myth structure. Inside Out is a female myth structure. Now, there's a lot of different female myths, but there are certain similarities that we see in all of them. And the way I usually explain it for audiences in terms of theme, if you could simplify it down to one line, is male myth is all about divide and conquer. Female myth is about combine and grow. And those are very different things.
What is Toy Story 3?
I'm going to have to think about it for a little
Toy Story? I mean, it's about a group of people. I mean, in almost every Pixar film, in the end of the story, not all of them, but in many of them, Ratatouille, Bug's Life, Incredibles, it's a group of people. Yeah. The hero goes off by himself or herself and then finds they need a group. The group could be a family, it could be your tribe to save, it could be all your rat relatives to save the day. I don't see those as divide and conquer stories. I don't know. Again, you give me a rule, I'll find the exception.
And again, I have to go through my encyclopedia. I do remember that I thought Toy Story 3 was the best of the three Toy Stories, and I think they're all great scripts. I think it's a fabulous series of stories. But
I mean, Coco is about a boy who has to heal his family in two realms: the current living family and his ancestors, because he goes into the land of the dead. It's wonderful, but no one's dividing and no one's conquering. It's kind of the opposite.
Again, just because you have a female in a story doesn't make it a female myth. Just because you have a male in a story doesn't make it a male myth.
That is true.
It is the structural beats of the story that determine it and the overall theme. which leads me to think that Toy Story 3 may very well be a female myth. There's certain things that are obvious. My point in bringing it up is that this emergence of female myth is huge. And I believe it's going to be one of the major story forms for the next decades to come. And it's something I want to talk about. I suspect that you two will be talking about it as well. And everywhere I go around the world when I teach class, the one thing that people are more interested in, writers are more interested than any other subject, is female myth.
Yeah, I think you're right that it is some kind of pivot that's happening, as big as what happened in '77 when Star Wars came out, and just like a switch was turned from anti-heroes and little kitchen sink dramas and, serious streets and all of that into, oh no, we can revive this whole thing. So I think you're right that it's, nearly even more.
I think your comments are extremely well taken, obviously by me, because that's my area of expertise. But and I think it tells us a lot about where the culture resides as well.
Yeah.
Because I define it slightly differently, but that we're both saying the same thing. So much of our storytelling has been oriented toward the masculine, and I define the masculine archetypally as our experiences in the outer physical world. Mm-hmm. And those experiences are essential in life. They're not like either or. We need, the whole warrior archetype is something that is essential to every human being, that we need to protect our boundaries. We need to create worlds that we can live in. We need to, form of identification, and on and on and on. These are all external challenges that we all face, so we create an external reality. And the feminine mythologies, when you open them up, that whereas the masculine is an outer-bound journey, the feminine is an inbound journey, okay? So whereas he's going out, she's going down and in. And so it's not either or. We get back to the idea of character arc. This is what a character arc is showing us, that we face challenges in the outer world that are impacting our inner life.
So Birdman is a female myth?
Well, okay, you keep it. It's not that we relegate it to a myth, okay? That one of the things that you'd never want to do is write to a myth. In other words, this is something. Mythic stories are told and retold because they are sort of the container that has moved the human narrative through time. And one of the things that we say is that the more you tell a story, the more you're telling our story. So that a myth that has survived is a container of something very valuable. So that you write a story, and then somewhere in that story you may find that you are telling a particular mythic tale or just aspects of the tale.
I feel like I have to channel Chris.
It's not a thing.
Okay, channel me, baby.
So I'm going to try to channel you, because you probably have done a deeper dive into mythic structures more than anyone at this table, and you're noted for that. I think you would say, and if not, I'll say it for you, that if you're using this structure or that structure, you're using your structure or some mythic structure, or you're using some system, or you're talking about male-female myths and divide and conquer, or let's come together and hug, or whatever, or work it out together, or let's go internal, or let's go externally. And I'll say this to the camera, I'll say it to the people watching this. You're going to find a lot of great thought on many different systems. And some will pull you and you'll gravitate toward them, and some will make no sense to you. If you find principles or systems that aid you in your storytelling, just make sure that by the time you're done with your story, no one knows that you were using a system. That is, unless you make it so original and creative, and you break the rules, and you don't have cliche scenes, and you don't have cliche characters. And my definition of boredom is the audience thinks they know what's going to happen, and then it happens. As long as you never bore people and you keep the level of imagination front and center, That's the critical thing. So if you find a system or two that work for you, just make sure that you bury it enough with your imagination, your creativity, and the authenticity or the pretend authenticity, whatever it is that draws the audience in, that we never see the formulas poking through. That's it.
Did he challenge you, Chris?
I said that very well.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Story Expo's Masters of Story Roundtable discussion. For information and to register for the upcoming Masters of Story conference in Los Angeles the weekend of September 27th, 28th and 29th, featuring live masterclasses with John Truby, Chris Vogler, David Freeman, Dara and Corey Mandell, please visit storyexpo.com. Don't miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to become the best writer you can be and to network with hundreds of other fellow writers from around the world. We'll see you there.